And so, what do they think the World Economic Forum really wants to do? Well, the goal was to weaken the role of the state in global decision-making and to elevate the role of the new set of stakeholders, turning our multilateral system into a multi-stakeholder system. Companies are a part of the governing mechanisms. Okay, so what's the big deal? What would that do? The letter continues. This would bring transnational corporations, selected civil society representatives, states, and other non-state actors together to make global decisions, disregarding or ignoring critical concerns around conflicts of interest, accountability, and democracy. Mm-hmm. Oh, so the unelected body of unelected officials supported by the international legal frameworks, by the CSOs and the corporations, putting the flesh on the bones of this international global body. These guys see that as a problem. And I concur.
Yeah.
Well, what else? It doesn't stop there. The public-private partnerships will permanently associate the United Nations with transnational corporations. This is a form of corporate capture. Well, of course it is. That was the goal. And so now imagine, reading this letter, knowing that this is exactly why you set up, and now there's an outside entity that's able to detail it. Piece by piece, right? So this is why you have all this propaganda that the United Nations is this peacekeeping organization. It's just a place for nation states to come together and voice their concerns about global common problems. Right? That's That's the exoteric doctrine, right? The esoteric doctrine is completely different. And so they continue. We know that agribusiness destroys biodiversity. What else? Oil and gas corporations endanger the world climate. What else? Big Pharma weakens access to essential medications. Well, what else? Extractive corporations leave lasting damage to countries, ecologies, and people. What else? And that arms manufacturers profit from local and regional wars, as well as repression of social movements. And here's the clincher. All of these sectors are significant actors within the World Economic Forum. The very guys that are saying, hey, we need to save the world from all these polluters are themselves the biggest polluters that are putting out the propaganda. What did Lenin say? You don't go into a country that you're going to subvert with communism and tell them how bad capitalism is. Yeah. You become the greatest
biggest champion for the capitalism. Yeah,
by telling people how bad communism is. And when people like the rhetoric and they elect you to power, then you just implement communism, but under different terms in the capitalist environment. And so, what does the European Parliament think tank have to say about this, right? So we have a link here that people can follow. So why are they being criticized? Well, the article continues. To its proponents, the organization, through its meetings, enables businesses, NGOs, and political leaders to do what? Well, to meet and deliberate possible solutions to key issues on global concern. To its critics, the forum, and especially its annual meetings, are nothing more than an opaque venue for political and business leaders to take decisions or to make decisions without having to account to either their electorate or their shareholders. And so in November 15, 1999, an article Schwab says, global companies do not fit behind neat national borders. The sovereign state has become obsolete, says Schwab, as the world resembles regional powers. He says, we need a global issue alliance. The interviewer says, you mean global government? Schwab says, that's the last thing we want. We facilitate the process of decision making, right? And so now Schwab may not want world government, but there is someone else operating behind Schwab that Schwab fails to mention. And so what would be the purpose then of the World Economic Forum? Let's ask Ettore Gotti Tedeschi. He's an Italian economist and banker. He's the ex-president of the Institute of Works of Religion, also known as Vatican Bank. And he says in a video that we can put up later, Tedeschi says, what is it called? He goes, its name is the New World Economic Order. Well, when was it conceived? It was conceived between the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s. Okay. Well, who was its originator? Its originator was Henry Kissinger. At the very beginning, it was a veritable reset. Okay. What were you trying to do with it? Well, we were trying to correct the mistakes that we have been making for the last 50 years, since the very first reset. So
learn from the mistakes and build back better.
There you go. There you go. Right. So, what was the first reset called? Oh, that was known as the New World Economic Order, which was designed in the 70s. And so, what was the old New World Economic Order founded upon? Well, he says it's founded upon a series of facts that ignore natural law, which we can define as not always natural and pretty utopian. After 50 years since the first reset of the 70s, it produced several mistakes. A second reset is needed today. And then he reiterates, he says, the current reset, commonly called the Great Reset, is nothing but a correction of the mistakes which we have been making over the last 50 years. So, therefore, thanks to, or rather taking advantage of, this unfortunate situation called the COVID pandemic, there is the possibility to boost, or rather, I will use a strong expression, to impose or cause to be imposed certain behaviors. Nevertheless, today, reset is the correction of the mistakes made by yesterday's reset.
So it's a great reset of their system. It's not for us, it's not for everything, this is for them.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's continue. So what was the problem that you were trying to solve then? Well, we had too many births. And as a consequence, the need to decrease the birth rate of the population. Wow. Okay, then...
he said it just like that, huh? Not even hiding at this point. Yeah.
Straight up.
Straight up.
So what was the first side effect to these policies? Well, he goes, the birth rate dropped, but where? In the Western world. The shrinking of the population took place mainly in the so-called Western world.
But that's the ones we need.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but where in the Western world? Well, the United States and Europe. Why is the population growth supposed to be reduced? And so he provides an answer. Because according to the neo-Malthusian worldview, the more people are born, the more people consume, the more people waste what nature provides for us. And so now we're going to get into this idea of reducing the population. So by another revolution, though. And so just as the Industrial Revolution got it all started with empowering the peasants to become the middle class and an aristocracy, we need a technical revolution that Klaus Schwab termed the Fourth Industrial Revolution to destroy the aspects of the Industrial Revolution, created the middle class, and turning the middle class back into the peasant class. Well, how are you going to do this? Well, we're going to do it a few ways. By limiting the amount of people that can actually participate in the job market. And so they will create an artificial or synthetic middle class then, removing the lifeblood of the middle class altogether, their ability to work and create wealth, which gave rise to them in the first place. And so, well, how are you going to do that? Klaus has already spelled it out. By AI, automation, algorithms, robot, and 3D printing.
You know what's the good thing? If they at any time they need interruption of that system, they have the cyber attacks that they're already preparing for. And,
right.
You know, they want to make sure that they're ready, because the next cyber attack could be bigger than, compared to that, COVID-19 would be insignificant.
Right.
What did you say?
A minor inconvenience.
Minor inconvenience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so he says, remember, it was we were saying this. Remember, it was the Industrial Revolution that gave rise to the commoner that created the middle class. And once they got wealthy, they wanted to participate in their political future. They won't have that problem with robots. Robots are going to be robots. They're going to do exactly what they're told. And so a robot is, they'll be there in an assembly line making the next Tesla, so you don't have a factory worker that's sitting there that needs to change his shift or go home to be indoctrinated by CNN.
They have these human rights that you can only work a certain amount of hours. You have to give them breaks. You have to pay some sick pay, this and that. Robots eliminate all that too, right?
Right. And so, what does this next industrial revolution, what does it actually mean? Well, Klaus Schwab, the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, puts it this way. He says on page 14, the first industrial revolution spanned from about 1760 to around 1840. Triggered by the construction of railroads and the invention of the steam engine. It ushered in a mechanical production. Okay, got it. Well, what happened next? Well, the second industrial revolution was started in the late 19th century into the early 20th century and made mass production possible, fostered by the advent of electricity and the assembly line. Okay, good, got it. Okay, what happened after that? Well, the third industrial revolution began in the 1960s. It usually is called the computer or the digital revolution because it was catalyzed by the development of semiconductors, mainframe computing in the 1960s, personal computing in the 1970s and 80s, and the internet in the 1990s. Great, got it. So, what do you think is going to happen next, Santa Claus? Well,
Santa Claus.
So I believe that today we are at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. It began at the turn of the century. It builds on the digital revolution. Well, what characterizes this fourth industrial revolution then? Well, it's characterized by a much more ubiquitous and mobile internet, by smaller and more powerful sensors that have become cheaper, and by artificial intelligence and machine learning. Okay. There's a description from the book, that provides a good summary. If you read the description of the book, it says, artificial intelligence is already all around us, from supercomputers, drones, and virtual assistants to 3D printing, DNA sequencing, smart thermostats, wearable sensors, microchips, and that are small as a grain of sand. That really means that you're going to take the jobs out of the hands of the middle class so that you can gut the middle class and its wealth and its resources. And you can do this with a technological revolution. So what will the next decade look like in this scenario? Well, in the next 20, 40, 50 years, it won't be the immigrants taking the jobs of Americans as it's claimed. Well, what will it be? It's going to be AI, algorithms, robots, and 3D printers. And so it's going to put millions of people out of their jobs. If they're out of their jobs, they can no longer create wealth. If they cannot create wealth, then they will further lose their ability to participate in their political future and be relegated back to the peasant class as they were before, if they even exist at all, as a subspecies, according to Yuval Harari. And so, why will they lose their ability to participate in their political future? Well, because in the corporate state, which is the phase that we're moving towards, corporations control the economic, political, and judicial systems of nation states. And the corporate state will self-select from its own members, promotion from within, like many corporations do today, and will not be democratically elected.
It was never democratically elected.
Right.
But now officially.
Officially, that's...
No more democracy, guys.
Yes, right. And so Klaus Schwab, again, executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, page 68, makes it clear. He says, governments must also adapt to the fact that power is shifting from state to non-state actors, and from established institutions to loose networks. Down below, he says, with few exceptions, policymakers are finding it harder to effect change. They are constrained by rival power centers, including the transnational, provincial, local, and even the individual. Micro powers are now capable of constraining macro powers, such as national governments.